Welcome to another video exploring what you might call basic life events from an autistic perspective. Before, we've looked at haircuts and the difficulties that some autistic people might experience with that. Some autistic people, not all. Today we're going to look at another fairly common event, eating out. Now, if you're a parent of an autistic person, or you're autistic yourselves, or you spend any time with autistic people, it's probable that you've experienced the various trickinesses, the various difficulties that eating out can present to an autistic individual. So I'm going to try and break it down into what are the big problems there. Why is it that autistic people can struggle with this? And again, disclaimer, not all autistic people do. There is no such thing as something that is always the case for autistic people, but I think we can all agree it's a relatively common phenomenon. So, eating out, what's the deal here? Well, eating out presents a number of various challenges to different aspects of being autistic. Okay, number one, of course, we're going to come back to this an awful lot. I think this is going to be common to most of these videos. You have the sensory side of things. We always have to factor this in. I think any situation a person finds themselves in is going to have a sensory element to it, so it's entirely reasonable that autistic people might struggle with the sensory environment of a restaurant or a fast food place or even a coffee shop. The reason for this is that the sensory environment in these places is often far more chaotic than you would have in, well, many other spaces where an autistic person might spend their time. An autistic person who lives at home, of course they live at home, but an autistic person that has a home which is theirs, either it's their parents or it's theirs, their own, will probably, maybe even without even noticing or realising they're doing it, have made it very comfortable for themselves as much as they can. They'll have made it suitable for their sensory profile, for their particular sensory needs. A restaurant, on the other hand, of course, does not have that facility. It is designed and built for the sole purpose of providing food in large amounts to a large number of people. Therefore, things often will be quite noisy. The lighting will be different, either brighter or dimmer, depending on the kind of restaurant. There'll be differences in the comfort of seating, in the positioning of tables, how high or low are they, the temperature, the smells of, coming from the kitchen and other parts of the building. There's going to be a whole host of sensory difficulties for any autistic person seeking to eat out. And this could affect them a great deal, or it could only affect them a little bit. I, for example, am not massively affected by the sensory experience of a restaurant. I don't have much in the way of taste sensitivities, and my sound sensitivities basically just mean that I do tend to choose quieter spots, quieter places. I don't really want to go to a bustling, busy restaurant. I'd like to go to somewhere that's quieter. I go for a coffee every morning, and I purposefully go very early, so I'm there before the crowds come in for their morning coffee. I'm, like 7 o'clock. I'm there sitting, drinking my coffee, and it's dead, it's quiet, it's peaceful, serene, it's lovely. But for some autistic people, even that will be too much. Even that level of noise and activity around them will be too much. So if you're wanting to take an autistic person to a restaurant, that is something you're going to have to really think about. And if you are autistic, going to a restaurant that is uncomfortable for you, then that discomfort, whatever form it takes, the noise, the smells, the sights, whatever, will overwhelm the senses. And this can lead to a various number of after effects, like it'll lead to irritability. It can ironically lead to a loss of appetite, which is, not ideal when you're wanting to eat out. It can lead to impatience, annoyance, tears, crying, huge emotional states. It can lead to meltdown. It can lead to shutdown in the worst cases, especially if it's not taken into account and if the people around the person don't care and are, kind of railroad them into doing what they do without any understanding of their difference. So you really have to think about that. And this is why it's so important to do a sensory sort of audit, really, a sensory profile for any autistic people you live with or work with or spend time with, and figure out what their needs are. In the same way that I know I can't go anywhere that's too busy, too noisy, or too packed with people, you might need to know that your autistic person or you yourself can't deal with anywhere that smells really strongly. There are, of course, some restaurants that smell stronger than others, depending on the cuisine, depending on the layout of the kitchen, and all kinds of factors. There's all kinds of things you need to bear in mind. Same with lighting, same with the taste of the food, same with the feel of things, the temperature, the humidity, and so on and so forth. All of these things need to be considered because it's a fast track to meltdown if you are forced as an autistic person to sit in a stressful environment and, what's second on our list, socialise. Because that's the other thing about eating out. It's not just about, if it was just about going somewhere and eating, that would be one thing. I like that. I spend a lot of time travelling for my work, so I find myself eating alone in places quite frequently. And I like that because I'm there to go in, I eat my food and I leave. I'll read a book while I'm at it or play on my phone. And that's fine. I love that. There's no social aspect really at all. But if you go out for a meal with people, of course, it's primarily a social occasion. It's not really about the food at all. The food can often be almost incidental to the social event of it all, especially if it is an occasion like a birthday or something like that. Then the social aspect of it takes massive precedence, which can make things very difficult for some autistic people. It means that there will be a lot of conversation, potentially with people you don't know very well. It means there will be a lot of chatter around a table, which can often lead to the sensory discomfort I talked about a moment ago of loads of people talking at once. It can lead to awkward conversations between people who might have different viewpoints. It can just be very, very awkward and tricky to navigate as an autistic person. Many autistic people, if they do socialise, we might prefer to socialise only with one other person. That's my preference. Or if we do go out as a group, you want it to be all people that you know very well so that you feel safe and understood. When you eat out at a restaurant, that might not be the case. And therefore, stress levels can get very high very quickly. If you're an autistic child in a setting like this, it might also be that you're just surrounded by adults. How many times did that happen for, when you were a kid, taken by your parents somewhere and you end up eating out with just mostly adults, family members and things? It's just the tension and stress is unbearable. But it's not understood. We're expected to go along. We're expected to make small talk. We're expected to laugh along with the jokes. We're expected to sit at the table for the whole time. We're not allowed to get our phones out and play on them. We're not allowed to play on our Game Boy. What year is this? We're not allowed to play on our Switch or whatever, mobile gaming device we might have. We're not allowed to get up and have a walk around. All of the things that might normally bring us a feeling of safety and autonomy and help us get through a difficult situation like this is taken from us. We're not allowed to stim. We're not allowed to vocally stim. We're not allowed to do anything. We're not allowed to talk about our special interests. We are hemmed in by society's expectations in a restaurant, often, in a way that is incredibly difficult to manage for any autistic person of any age, but particularly for children who haven't necessarily yet, figured all this stuff out and found workarounds and life hacks to try and survive it. So you're going to find lots and lots of problems there as well around the communication side of things. And that leads us to my third and final point about why this particular situation is quite tricky. And that is specifically the food. Autistic people are often really routine-based. We like what we like, and we stick with what we like. The reasons for this are so varied and complex that they deserve a video of their own, but partly it's to manage stress levels. We like to keep a routine because it keeps our stress levels at a manageable level. We might, for example, have a very set diet of food that we eat. Some autistic people have the same food every day or the same weekly pattern of food. I do, for example, really only have maybe 10 to 15 different sort of meals that I'm happy to have. And I class myself as being relatively free with food, but actually thinking about it, I am pretty limited. I do only tend to eat what I like and what I feel safe with and what I know I will enjoy. I don't take many risks. Restaurants, of course, they're not the food you have at home. They might be a place you've been before, and that will often be one way that you can make this really easy for an autistic person. Go back to the same place frequently. That really helps. But of course, neurotypical people might get bored of that. I mean, hell, autistic people might get bored of that, especially if they're ADHD. They might, I want to go somewhere new. But it is a way that you can try and make this a bit easier for the autistic individuals and autistic people for yourselves. You know, if you want to eat out, try and go to the same place. Like, I always go to the same coffee shop. I always go to the same takeaways, you know, because I know what I'm getting and I feel safe. But if you haven't got that, then you're entering into a world of unknown with food. Tastes, textures, temperatures, all kinds of aspects, which can be really, really unpleasant to deal with. There's so much anxiety then around all of this stuff. Will I like the food? Will it make me gag? Will it feel horrible in my mouth? And will I make a kind of spectacle of myself, you know, by spitting it out or freaking out? Because often those reactions are very, very visceral and we can't help them. People often view autistic limitations around food, you know, ARFID style responses as performative, as faddiness, or, you know, being really choosy and picky. It's not. Often it's really visceral. It's really physical. You get something in your mouth that you don't like the feel of, or the kind of consistency of, or the texture, or the flavour of, and the need to, you know, get it out of your mouth as fast as possible can be overwhelming. You do that eating at a posh restaurant for your grandma's, you know, 90th birthday celebrations. That won't be great. And I'm not saying that in terms of, you know, you have failed by that. What I mean is people's response won't be great. In my opinion, you have every right to do that, but people won't respond well to that. People will get very angry with you and they'll think that you've ruined the day. It's like, well, have you ever thought about how my day's been ruined? Anyway, we have to bear this in mind. Too often, autistic people, especially children, are just dragged off to these places, and the assumption is that they can just deal with it. I'd like to invite people to kind of take a step back and recognise maybe they shouldn't have to. Maybe we shouldn't be putting people in that position, in that high stress position, because it's just not fair. You wouldn't like it if we did the same to you. You know, because the equivalent would, like, you know, dropping you into a tiger's cage and saying, just enjoy it, you'll be fine. I don't think you'd be very happy with that. So bear that in mind. I will do more of these next time. In fact, let me know in the comments if there are any everyday occurrences that autistic people struggle with that you'd like me to explore. I'd be really happy to take requests, you know, or ideas from other people. So thank you very much. See you again.